Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthologies. Written by Dr. Jeffrey A. Robinson and Don Muchow, and narrated by Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. The Traveling Salesman, Part 13. I should have been ecstatic. Here I was on a planet entirely devoted to gambling and entertainment, surrounded by some of the richest people in the galaxy, and ready to close the biggest deal of a lifetime. No, 1,000 lifetimes. And I was terrified. In my travels with my alien business partner, Glactyl, one of the things I had seen repeatedly was that if it looked like things were going well, they weren't. As I waited at the bar, I downed the drink I'd ordered to calm my nerves. Meanwhile, Glactyl typed away at this display of his handheld comms pad. "You know, we had those on Earth 1,000 years ago," I said. "People used them to share propaganda, memes, and pictures of cute cats." "What?" "Forget it," I said, returning to my drink. Glactyl nudged me in the ribs, and I almost spit it up. "What the French fried fuck?" "Take it easy there, my friend," said Glactyl, as his thin fingers danced across the display of his handheld. "That's loaded with endorphin-producing drugs and painkillers. You'll never wake up with a hangover, but it's also very addictive." "Yeah, I know," I said. "That's why I'm drinking it. But perhaps it'll distract me from the fact that we're the two chickens in a dogfight." "Ah," Glactyl started to say. Then, "Wait, what?" "Forget it," I said, taking another sip. "Just relax," Glactyl said. "The auction we set up to sell the Nova Core isn't until tomorrow at 4 p.m. All we have to do is lie low until then. Trust me, nothing can go wrong." This time I did spit out my drink, which brought an ugly glower from some muscle-bound, four-armed greaser who looked like a bad science experiment that had somehow survived just long enough to get adopted by an abusive, dysfunctional family in Camden Yards, New Jersey. I felt a cold wave pass over me like the hand of doom. "I don't trust you. And you do realize that this is precisely the sort of place and time when everything can go wrong?" Glactyl frowned. He did, however, have a point about the Nova Core. The Nova Core was a piece of rock maybe 100 miles across, probably a fragment of something much larger, that consisted almost entirely of precious metals, transuranic elements, and rare earths. It contained more concentrated wealth than could be found on most mining planets, and if the legends were true, it was so rich that it hardly even needed to be refined. It was literally worth more than most star systems. Our argument was that the only reason we were selling it was that we didn't have the resources to mine it, distribute the metals, or defend it. "Relax," Glactyl repeated. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "Relax? You're the one who told me that there are people who would gladly kill us if they thought we knew the location of that lost planetoid. According to you, that information alone is worth trillions of credits." "For God's sake, calm down," said Glactyl. "No one knows." Then he paused and whispered, "And no one will know unless you keep talking about it in public places like this." Suddenly paranoid, I looked right and left, searching for anyone that might be watching us. "Never mind that for now," said Glactyl. "I've managed to get some information on Vecna's mark." Staring at his communication pad, Glactyl read the details he'd retrieved. "He's a professor named Baraton Warwick, and he's a rather accomplished researcher at Nedia University out on the Rim." My hand trembled as thoughts turned to Vecna. Glactyl and I had met her a short while ago, while on the floor of the main casino, and she had immediately pegged us as fellow entrepreneurs, which in her line of work meant scam artists and grifters. She'd introduced herself to ward us off of someone she was planning to hustle. Then she reconsidered and told us that we might be of help to her after all, meaning she was likely willing to cut us in on the scam she was setting up. She'd arranged to meet us later here at the bar, and Glactyl thought that it might be fun to mess up her scam while we waited for the auction. Since then, he had been digging for information on Vecna and her intended victim. I didn't think it was such a good idea. "I don't know what her game is yet," Glactyl said, "but this guy is quite wealthy, though he does seem to have a serious gambling habit." "That's just about everyone in this room," I said. Then, at that exact moment, I spied Vecna working her way through the crowd toward us. Tugging on Glactyl's arm, I pointed. Vecna's species clearly had feline origins. She was lithe and graceful. Her cat-like eyes were both seductive and predatory. Her exotic aura alone was sufficient to cause the crowd before her to part, as she slowly sauntered toward us. "God," I said, "she looks like she was poured into that dress." "Actually," responded Glactyl, "she was, in a way. That fabric is made from a stabilized liquid polymer. That's why it shimmers the way it does." "How do you know that?" I asked incredulously, forcing myself to look away and take another large gulp from my drink. "Because I am Glactyl, and I know things." At that moment, I thought Glactyl might actually be drunk. "So, boys," Vecna said as she reached the two of us, "I promised to meet you here, but I'm late. I hope I didn't inconvenience you." It was the way she said that last part that kind of rolled into a purr that implied inconveniencing someone might be much more fun. "No, not really," said Glactyl nonchalantly. "I do seem to remember, though, that you said we might do some business together. What do you have in mind?" "Well," Vecna said in a low growl, "I was wondering if either of you had any familiarity with exotic technologies." As Glactyl made eye contact with me, I almost choked on my drink. I explained, with considerable doubt as to what came next in the sentence. "Some," said Glactyl. "What specifically do you mean?" "Oh, it's pretty advanced. It has to do with temporal mechanics. Probably not your bailiwick." I choked again, coughing and spraying alcohol across the bar. One of the reasons we were here was because we'd been thrown 1,000 years into the future while playing with alien tech. So, yeah, we had some familiarity with it. Not that I was going to tell this little Matahari. Glactyl smiled. "Actually, we do have some expertise in that area. How might we help?" "Well," Vecna whispered, "my friend, client, who I pointed out to you earlier, claims that he possesses a working prototype of a portable time machine, and I was wondering if you could help me determine whether or not it's authentic." "We'd be glad to help," Glactyl replied smoothly. "When do you need us?" "At precisely 4 p.m. tomorrow. I've made arrangements for him to bring the prototype to me at that time. We can discuss it then." I blinked in surprise, but this time remained silent rather than spraying the crowd again. "Sorry," Glactyl replied with a practiced cool. "But we have something else planned at that time." "Oh, that's right," Vecna gasped. "The auction. I forgot." "You know about that?" I asked. "Yes," said Vecna. "Remember? I told you that 2 of your colleagues approached me and invited me to the auction. I would love to, but the competition is out of my league. I understand that Gaspar Poe will begin the bidding at 100 billion credits." No one but the two of us knew that Gaspar Poe was a fictitious identity that we'd created to host the auction. We posed as two of his hirelings and, along with 4 other teams, had approached prospective buyers for the auction we had arranged. But no one knew that we were really the ones in charge. "Well, I'm sorry you will miss the event," I said. "Not a problem. I have my own plans. How does that work? How will Gaspar sell the location of the Tarat Novar?" That was the name of the Nova Corps. It meant the Gem of Heaven in some dead alien language. "Well," explained Glactyl, "the auction house will manage the sale. They have the location of the Tarat Novar and registered ownership papers locked in a special courier capsule. One of those can only be opened using a telepathic crypto key. Any attempt to open it without that key will result in the destruction of its contents. After confirmation of the sale, the bidder's money will be transferred to Gaspar Poe's accounts, and the capsule will be opened and given to the buyer." Vecna frowned. "As you said, I wish I could be there. But I'm scheduled to meet with my own client at that same time." It was then that Glactyl smiled wryly and asked, "So, what's the deal? Are you planning to rip this guy off?" "Well, after a fashion. If his prototype is real, it'd be worth millions. But this guy's thinking small and is willing to give it to me for a mere 50,000 credits. He's only thinking about paying off his gambling debts and doesn't realize how much he could really get for it. Anyway, I've arranged to meet him at 4 o'clock near the power reactors beneath this casino. The shielding there is particularly heavy, so no one should be able to eavesdrop or monitor the transaction." "That seems prudent," commented Glactyl, "especially if the device is real." Vecna made a pouty face, which is kind of an odd thing to behold when you have feline facial characteristics. "Well, boys," she said, "I'm sorry you can't help me after all. I was hoping you might help me confirm the validity of the item." Then she waved her hand dismissively. "No matter. Maybe I'll just have to get him to demonstrate it for me. Then I could go back in time and join your auction after all." Vecna purred and winked at me. "Or further back in time. Then we could have some fun." Then she simply turned and headed back to Professor Warwick, as heads turned to watch her sashay through the crowd. After a moment, I asked, "So what are your plans now? Are you still planning to mess with her and her mark?" "Not here," replied Glactyl. "I'll tell you in the morning. For now, just enjoy yourself for a change." I tried, but I couldn't rid myself of the bad feeling that I'd been to this rodeo before and recognized the bull and all the clowns. Moreover, I wasn't in the mood to enjoy myself. As a consequence, I drank far too much and lost track of the evening. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when I moaned and sat up, blinking against the bright lights in the room. I was still fully dressed and found myself in bed in the spacious hotel suite in the VIP section of the casino hotel where Glactyl and I had stayed for the last few days. As advertised, I woke up without a hangover, and my worry and paranoia were completely gone. But I also had no memory of what happened the night before, or how I had gotten here. Rising from the bed, I noted Glactyl in the other room of our suite working on his computer. Otto, our bodyguard, stood diligently at the door, fully armed and ready to protect us at a moment's notice. As I awoke, he nodded politely.
"Mr. Bob,"
Otto said.
"Hope you slept well."
I felt the back of my head, where I was certain I'd been getting the beginnings of a pounding headache, but nothing came. "Pretty well, actually, Otto. Thanks."
"You're welcome, sir."
Hey, sleepyhead, Glactyl said as he turned from his work. I was just about to wake you. We have an important appointment. Hurry up and get dressed. Well, that little reverie ended quickly, I said. Do I have time to order some breakfast? No. Fuck. As I changed into a new suit, I asked, What's the hurry? Well, you remember when Vecna told me she was going to meet her mark at 4 o'clock to purchase that time travel device? Yes. Well, I've changed those plans. What do you mean? I mean that I posed as Vecna and called Professor Warwick to move the meeting up. We'll be meeting him at noon. I plan to hijack her sale before our auction at 4. You're going to pretend to be Vecna? I asked, incredulously. Yes, he replied, pulling out his multifunctional unitool and touching a few buttons. Immediately, Glactyl disappeared and was replaced by a perfect image of the feline con woman. It disturbed me that I found myself lustfully staring at Glactyl's disguise. It was, of course, only a holographic projection. I'd almost forgotten that function, though Glactyl had used it extensively back when we did business on Earth. So long ago. Glactyl switched the device off. Think it'll fool him? I asked. Sure, Glactyl said. He'll never suspect a thing. We'll make the purchase and be back in plenty of time to close the sale of the lost Nova Core. It will be as easy as cake. You mean easy as pie? Glactyl blinked. What's the difference? One is... I began. You know what? Never mind. Do you think the professor will agree to the time change? He's already confirmed it, but we need to hurry. It's a long walk to the rendezvous point, since we'll have to find our way through the underground tunnels below the fusion plant that powers this facility. It should take us about 20 minutes to get there, so we'll have to leave soon. Why not change the location? Well, said Glactyl, it was already set up and it is out of the way, so we'll avoid surveillance. Besides, I didn't want to make him suspicious by changing too much, but we'll have to act fast so Vecna doesn't catch on to what we're doing. Ah, I said, trying to keep up both physically and dialectically. Don't worry, Glactyl said. This'll be a piece of pie. One day, I said, when this is all over, I will explain to you why you can't just swap out cake and pie. I look forward to it, Glactyl said. Hey, I said, let's leave now. That way I can grab something from one of the restaurants downstairs and eat along the way. I get cranky working on an empty stomach. As you wish, Glactyl said. Then, pulling out the unitool, he pressed a button and sashayed across the room toward the door in his fabulous, shimmering, liquid metal dress. We arrived right on time, but Warwick wasn't there. Glactyl, Otto, and I had no choice but to wait. Perhaps he's running late, I said. Do you think he changed his mind? Maybe, said Glactyl. But then again, this is something of a maze. He might have just gotten lost. Let's just wait a while. I sent Otto down one of the long tunnels to see if anyone was coming, instructing him to return right away. While we wait, said Glactyl, I'm going to read more of these instructions on the unitool that Drimjack showed me how to access. He leaned against the wall as he did this, and the slight bend in his posture accentuated the feminine curve of his hips. Shake out of it, Bob. I tried to distract myself by thinking of anything else, but that just made me worry more about Drimjack, the mob boss we'd barely escaped from. We still didn't know what had become of him. We'd tricked him into banishing himself through a portal into a multi-dimensional transportation network, but we weren't sure if he was alive or dead, or whether he might show up again without any notice. I was, however, very certain that, if he did show up, his highest priority would be to kill the two of us. Suddenly, my paranoia had returned. At least I wasn't thinking about humping my business partner. Her dress was incredibly distracting. So, there was that. I chewed at a fingernail nervously, imagining uncounted disastrous scenarios, while Glactyl continued to play with his ancient high-tech toy. Periodically, Glactyl would mumble things like, "Fascinating, who would have guessed it could do that?" Or, "Amazing, I'll have to remember that one." After about an hour, I said, "I'm worried that Warwick's not going to show up." "Don't fret," responded Glactyl. "Even if he's a no-show, we'll still have plenty of time to get to our auction. The time travel device probably doesn't work anyway. From my understanding of temporal mechanics, it would need a naked singularity to power it." A few minutes later, we heard someone coming down the long tunnel. In the distance, I spied the silhouetted form of someone approaching. Checking that Glactyl's disguise was in order, I stepped back so I wouldn't interfere. Finally, Professor Warwick arrived. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "I got lost." "That's no problem," Glactyl said in Vecna's sensuous voice. "Just show me the device." "What device?" "The portable time travel prototype you were supposed to bring." "What do you mean? I told you we're decades away from building one. We haven't overcome the power issues. All I have are plans. They're classified, but I smuggled them out like you asked. Here." Glactyl took a data crystal from the professor and inserted it into his datapad. Then he paged through dozens of screens and schematics. Glancing at me, he muttered, "These are useless. They're all purely theoretical, and nothing particularly new." Warwick shrugged. "Suit yourself," he said. "Do you think Vecna might have just been bragging?" I whispered to Glactyl, glancing down at his dress again. "Maybe, but she's probably planned something else." "Well, that's 2 hours of my life I'll never get back," I said. "What a waste of time." Warwick started to walk away. "Wait a minute," I said, gesturing at Warwick. "He didn't mean it personally." Then Glactyl's eyes grew wide and he said, "Oh my God, 2 hours! That's it! We've been goosed on a wild chase!" "You mean sent on a wild goose chase, but never mind. What are you saying?" "Vecna's tricked us." "Huh?" said Warwick, now confused. But you're Vecna." "Shut up!" we both shouted at the same time. "She fooled us," repeated Glactyl. "She just wanted us out of the way." "But why? What part do you two have in any of this?" Warwick asked. Ignoring him, Glactyl explained. "Why, to take over the auction. I'll bet anything she moved up the auction while we were here. Hurry, we have to get back. I'll go on ahead. You catch up as fast as you can." "Wait," I asked. "What do you mean, you'll go on ahead?" "Oh, yes. Well, one of the new features I just discovered in the Unitool is that it can teleport the owner anywhere within 1,000 clicks of its intended destination. But it only works for one person. So I'll get to go back now, and you meet me at the Andromeda Ballroom. Just hurry." Taking out his Unitool, Glactyl banished the holographic image that had disguised him as Vecna and then disappeared. Warwick stood confused. "Wait, what should I do?" he asked. "Just stay here," I said.
I should come with you, right?
Said Otto. Crap, I'd forgotten about Otto. "Of course," I replied.
By the way, Mr. Glactyl looked pretty sexy there for a while. I was wondering if I'd have to fight you for her. Him. Anyway, I fought it off.
"Otto," I said, "are you armed?"
"Yes, sir.
He replied, pulling out a pistol from each holster.
One is set for wide area stun, and the other is set for tight focus kill."
"Perfect," I said. "Follow me." "What about me?" said Warwick. You can stay or leave, I said. You found your way here, you can probably find your way back. It would have been different if you'd had a real time machine. Sorry, not sorry. Then I took off down the tunnel, heading back the way we'd come. Reholstering his weapons, Otto hurried to keep up, leaving Professor Warwick behind in the small, dark tunnel, alone and confused. The VIP elevator door opened to the opulent ballroom, but the large room was almost empty. Panting from my long run, I hurried up to Glactyl. Otto followed a few steps behind. The guy was fit, quiet, and never complained. I had to hand him that. Meanwhile, Glactyl was arguing with a distinguished-looking being I recognized as one of the auction organizers. "I'm very sorry about that, sir," he was saying, "but I can't reverse the transaction. As I've already explained, once the funds have been transferred, we have no way of knowing where they went. Besides, all sales are final. There's nothing I can do." "What's happened?" I asked, struggling to catch my breath. "It's as I feared. After we left to meet Professor Warwick, Vecna contacted all of the buyers we'd lined up and told them the time of the auction had been moved up. She told everyone it'd begin promptly at 1 p.m., which was right when we were deep in the tunnels beneath the power plant. She posed as Gaspa Poe and started the bidding at 100 billion credits. It only took a few minutes to reach 1.1 trillion. The winning bidder was a representative of Comstar Mining Conglomerate, the largest mining organization in the galaxy. The sale set a new record for the highest cash prize for any auction in history. After the auction staff confirmed the funds and facilitated the transfer to her accounts, they opened the courier capsule to reveal the location of the lost Nova Core. Everyone left quickly. However, several buyers showed up later. They hadn't been able to get here on time, so they missed out on the bidding. They were quite angry that they had been excluded." Before Glactyl could say more, loud shouting came from the elevators behind them. "There they are!" shouted one of the voices. "Hurry, seize them! Don't let them get away!" The chief auctioneer backed away, a terrified expression on his face. My fears had come true. Everything had gone wrong. "Come on," shouted Glactyl. "We have to leave now. I'll meet you at the ship." "What?" I said, turning toward him. "You aren't going to use the Unitool again, are you?" But he disappeared before he could answer. "That son of a bitch," I muttered. "Otto, are you ready?"
"Sir, yes, sir,"
he answered, a little too enthusiastically. "Wide area stun," I commanded. Grinning triumphantly, Otto pulled out his pistol and aimed it at the approaching mob. When the pistol discharged, there was a blue flash, and everyone at the other end of the ballroom simply dropped to the floor, out cold. No one died. Grabbing Otto's arm, I said, "Good work, Otto. Stay with me." Then we ran as fast as we could toward the elevators to get back to where we docked our ship. I was out of breath long before we reached the ship, but at least the docking port was open and waiting for us when we arrived. As we entered, it closed behind us and we made our way to the bridge. "So what now, great leader?" I started, but Glactyl cut me off. "Be quiet," he said sharply. "We have to leave immediately." "Wait, what? Why?" I protested. "Because I have more bad news." I laughed. You've got to be kidding me. As if what just happened isn't bad enough. We get conned by a female hustler and lose out on a 1 trillion credit sale. Then we're chased by a mob of angry... "Shut up," Glactyl said grimly. "Drimjack has found us." My jaw dropped. He was right. This was far worse. This wasn't like the Hindenburg catching on fire and killing all its passengers in a fiery hydrogen explosion. It was more as if the Hindenburg explosion had somehow opened up a portal to the gates of hell. I didn't know how Drimjack had escaped from the interdimensional transportation nexus where we'd banished him, but he was back, along with his personal armada. As the boss of the Bentusi cartel, he had more than enough resources to not only destroy us, but most of the planet as well. Can we get away? I asked. Maybe, replied Glactyl. If we're fast enough, we might be able to reach space and activate our skip drive. I'll try to use the Unitool to mask our presence. Like we did last time, I said, finishing his sentence. But won't he expect that? Maybe. I'm hoping we'll be fast enough and he won't consider it until too late. So when can we leave? I asked. Now, answered Glactyl. Hold on to something. This might get bumpy. Then he activated the engines and the ship rose quickly into the sky. Even with inertial dampers on maximum, the G-forces nearly drove me to my knees. As we crossed the boundary between atmosphere and space, I heard the ship's engines power up. Oh, jinkus crap, said Glactyl. What's that? I asked, pointing at the view screen. In response to my question, Harold, our discount robot, answered, A jinkus is a small rodent that eats almost constantly and, as a result, has been known to defecate half its own weight in one day.
Wow, that is a lot of crap,
said Otto. Shut up, both of you, I shouted. I meant what's that on the view screen? On the main display, the image of Drimjack's flagship grew larger as it approached. Can we jump yet? I asked. Glactyl leaned up from the console and sighed. No, we can't. They've locked onto us with tractor beams, but we're not out of options yet. Digging into a pocket, Glactyl started tinkering with his Unitool. I hope this works. I've never tried it before. The communication system blasted a burst of static, and Drimjack's face dominated the screen. There you are, he said bluntly. Now, you die. Then, with no formalities, the Dreadnought's main blast cannons opened fire. And then, nothing happened. It was as if time stopped. Excellent, said Glactyl. That worked well. What did you do? I asked. I used a new function on the Unitool. It does have the ability to alter time. And on this setting, I accelerated the rate that time flows around us. That time outside will appear to have stopped. But what do we do now? Can we get away? I asked anxiously. Sadly, no. Like everything else around us, our engines have stopped, and anyway, in real time, we're still trapped by their tractor beam. Then what do you plan to do? Well, since we now have all the time we need to think, I'm going to find the right setting for time travel on this thing and take us back a day. Then we can attend the auction and leave before Drimjack appears. But wait, I said. If we go back in time, won't there be two of us? I mean, 2 of us in the tunnels and 2 more at the auction? Won't that create a paradox? Glactyl shrugged. I'll worry about that later. First, I want to survive. So, if time travel is our only way out, I'm taking it. I'm sorry, said a soft voice from behind me. I'm afraid we can't allow you to do that. I spun around. The 2 men's faces were hidden behind black masks. They were covered entirely in black fabric, shirt, pants, boots, and black capes. They even wore black gloves. Small black goggles hid their eyes. It all seemed overdone. Black much? I asked. Hello again, guys. Then, out of sheer irritation, what is it now? You know who we are? Asked one of the men. Yes, you're the famous Men in Black, time travelers. I met you back on Earth and again on Algar when we tricked the Praxian pirates. One of the 2 looked at the other. Well, that kind of blows our entrance. Shut up, said the other. Get it over with, I said. Whatever is going to go down is going to go down, so let's not drag it out. I gestured around. In case you haven't noticed, we're about to be blown out of the sky. Please don't interrupt, said one of the 2 MIBs. And you're correct regarding our having met before. Both of these incidents are pivotal moments in the history of the timeline. We had to ensure they were allowed to happen. But this, he gestured in the same way that I had, this was not supposed to occur. Nevertheless, what your partner plans to do cannot be allowed. Turning to address Glactyl, the second MIB said, You are the one that we've watched over for years. You've repeatedly made trouble for the timeline. Glactyl nodded silently, then shook his head in a second take. Wait, I'm the troublemaker? You found what you call the unit tool, and have used it frequently, the MIB continued. It's always had the power to travel through time, though you only recently realized that. We let you keep the item and use it, but only so long as you did not try to travel in time. Of course, said Glactyl. The Hlath-Zulti cannot allow anyone to go back and disrupt their origins. The two men in black glanced at one another. Very good. It's been millennia since anyone made that connection. So tell me, what else do you think you know? I know that the Hlath-Zulti were legendary ancients, even older than the Zil, who vanished 1,500 centuries ago. The Hlath-Zulti civilization was the first to discover time travel, and since then, they've policed the timeline to prevent others from learning how. You did this to ensure that your past and future are not altered. This guy's good, said one of the MIBs. Fast learner. Then you probably know what we do to those who threaten the temporal continuum, said the other. Glactyl nodded. You exile the banished to a time and place of their choosing. Almost. We exile you to a time or place on the planet of your choice. If you pick the time, we choose the place. And if you pick the place, then we select the time. Can those two come as well? Glactyl asked, pointing to Harold and Otto. Yes. Can we take anything with us? The two men in black looked at one another. We'll give you 5 minutes to gather what items you deem appropriate, but you can take no advanced technology, no weapons, and of course, no unitool. The man in black then extended his hand and took Glactyl's unitool. Hurry, grab what you can, ordered Glactyl as he hurried to the cargo bay. For the next few minutes, I ran around scooping up foodstuffs, since I didn't know where or when we might end up. And all I knew was I couldn't tolerate 1,000-year-old Luna bars again. I grabbed a water synthesizer and packages of food concentrates. That was all the edibles I could find. Glactyl, meanwhile, gathered some miscellaneous tools, and when we were done, the four of us, Glactyl, me, Harold the robot, and Otto, waited, looking like a clueless, shabbily equipped wilderness weekend expedition. Have you decided where you'd like to go? Yes, said Glactyl. The planet Etrigon. I started to protest. I had just assumed we would go to Earth. Oh well. All right, now pick a time or place. I choose a place, the city of Parvat, answered Glactyl. You realize that we then get to select the time. The city may not be there when you arrive. Yes, I understand, said Glactyl. Then so be it, said the MIB, and with a flourish, the light intensified and bent around us, and I felt like I was going blind and mad at the same time. As my eyes adjusted, I found myself standing in a featureless expanse of desert. Nothing else was visible. No vegetation, no mountains or water, just an endless stretch of sand dunes. Looking around, I said, I don't believe it. Just when I think things can't get worse, they do. Instead of facing a quick death, we can now look forward to a slow, horrible one as we die of thirst. Well, said Glactyl, maybe not. After all, you did bring the water synthesizer. Digging a tool out of his bag, he raised it into the air, held it there for a few seconds, and put it back. However, the humidity is below 5%. For your device to work, we'll need to wait for night, find shadow, or get really creative. In the meantime, don't get thirsty. I realized that Glactyl must have had something in mind when he picked this place, but I was still pissed. I suppose you are wondering why I picked this place, he said. I'm sure you had your reasons. Looking around, I stretched my arms out at our surroundings and said sarcastically, duh, the view, uninterrupted death, as far as the eye can see. Of course I don't fucking know. Care to explain? You haven't been doing a lot of that lately, and look where it's gotten us. In the middle of the fucking desert, on a planet that wants to kill us, with nothing but a fucking imbecile robot, and a chronically depressed prison guard with low self-esteem issues.
I'm doing better,
said Otto.
I do daily gratitude meditations in the mornings.
Also, said Harold, I'm not an imbecile. I'm defective. There's a difference. God! I exclaimed. We've landed in some kind of horrible mashup of The Wizard of Oz and Mad Max. Or maybe, you know what? I don't fucking care. We're in a freaking horror movie. Glactyl raised an eyebrow. Are you done? He asked. I let out a deep sigh. Yes, I said, after a long pause. I'm done. Fine, said Glactyl. In fact, I do have a plan. You see, many years ago, I found the Unitool on this planet. Of course, at that time, there was a thriving metropolis over there, on that hill. Glancing in that direction, I noted an outcrop of rock barely visible through the sand. This is the secret. When I found the Unitool, there was more than one of them, but I didn't know what they were back then, and I was in quite a hurry at the time. I only managed to grab one before I escaped my pursuers. Pointing at the hill, he added, it was in a chamber in tunnels and ruins far beneath the city. We're here to look for another Unitool. Then we can travel to whatever time and place we wish. Won't that just land us somewhere worse? I asked. When the MIB relocate us to where we can't pull this trick again? The MIBs won't be watching us anymore, said Glactyl, since we don't have one of their devices, and they won't know we've gotten a new one. I replied through pursed lips. I wasn't buying it, but what choice did I have? I didn't have a better plan. Fine, what do we do next? Glactyl pointed at the rocky outcrop and said, we're going over there, and we start digging. The Traveling Salesman continues in Part 14, where Bob and Glactyl find something unexpected, return to Earth, and consider parting ways. Thank you for listening. As you know by now, we love our listeners, fans, patrons, and supporters. We'd like to hear from you and let us know what you think. The best way to do that is to subscribe on our website, untold-tales.com. That's untold-tales.com. We want to make sure that we are creating stories and an experience that you're enjoying. So subscribe on our website. That'll put you on our email list. Again, thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.